Hey everybody, welcome back to Laptop Seniors. Today we're going to talk about being an expat, what it means to be an expat. And I think you'll find it really interesting and eye-opening because it's really how you end up being an expat and how good it is for you really has to do with your particular thinking. And expats think dramatically different than regular people. They're just a different breed, and I'll explain that in just a second. Also, this is going to be about Argentina and what happened with that first Argentinian post that we did, the first video on, and a pretty fair amount of negative comments came out of it. And I was looking at those like, well, this is really bizarre. We've been doing YouTube videos now between this channel and the channel that I had for almost 4.5 years. And it's the first time we ever got any negative comments. A few of them were like, okay, good point. But then most of them were like, man, this makes no sense at all if you've actually done the thing. And that all brought me to this video. So if you follow along, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit because there's different pieces of this, but at the end of the day, I think it'll explain why people become expats. And if you're going to be an expat and think about it, you know, what you're going to encounter and what you're doing, this will help you immensely because it's a whole different process than your normal life. And I don't mean about language, moving to a different country, and I don't mean any of that. I mean, it's your assessment of risk of what you're doing and the reward that comes with it. Because that's really what it boils down to. Risk, reward. Living in the Northeast right now, you get snow up to here. It's 20 below zero. You can do that, or you can be in Panama and you're on the equator and it's nice and warm. Not literally on the equator, but close enough. Okay, it's warm all the time. It's things like that, risk, reward, and your money and things. So let me just start with what sort of prompted this in addition to what I just mentioned. I have friends of ours a guy used to work for me. He was my sales manager at one of the stations that I ran. And I think I mentioned it before, but if not, I was in radio and I ran clusters of radio stations across the country. And he was a sales manager, and when he retired, him and his wife, they just immediately retired and went to Mexico. And that even shocked me. It was like, whoa, within 2 weeks they were there. And they went to Ajijic, Mexico, which is Lake Chapala outside of Guadalajara. And they stayed there for 5 years, and then, one thing led to another, and they sort of didn't want to be there anymore. Cartels and different things. It was starting to bother them, even though they had no cartels in that area. They moved to Spain and went through that whole process. As a matter of fact, I'll do a video probably with them, and they'll explain what it's like to immigrate, and be an expat, a retiree in Spain, because it was an interesting process. And you'll learn a lot from that when we get to it. But so they went there, and while I was talking to them because they were visiting about a month ago, and I said, let me ask you a question, because this thing about the Argentinian negative comments, it was sort of bugging me because I just didn't quite understand it. So I said, his name is Mike. I said, Mike, of all the people that you have ever met in your entire life, outside of people in Mexico or in Spain, expats who have moved away, just your friends, your relatives, co-workers, things, give me a percentage, roughly, a percentage in your mind of people who would be an expat. And what I mean by expat, because there's different kinds of expats. There's expats that work somewhere, and there's, all that sort of stuff. I'm talking about retirees. You've worked your entire life somewhere, you're getting a pension somewhere, or you've got a pretty decent savings that you don't need the pension, or both, or whatever, somewhere, and you leave your home country and you go to another country. I'm talking about that kind of expat only, retiree expat, okay, for this purpose, because that's kind of what the channel is. So I said, Mike, give me a percentage. He goes, he thought about it for a while. He goes, 1, maybe 2%. I don't even think it's 2%. I think it's like 1%, maybe less, 1.5. I've asked that to other people too, it's just like him, same answer. So what I'm kind of pointing out to you, and you should take these things into consideration. And it's not a harm thing, nobody means anything bad for you, but 98, let's say it's 2%, 98% of the people that and your relatives, friends, co-workers, etc., they will try to talk you out of it, okay? They'd think it's a bad idea. What are you doing that for? 98% pretty easily will say, I don't know if you should be do that. Or at the very least, they'll just be quiet about it and let you go on your way and not try to talk you out of it. But it's going to be somewhere in that realm. And the reasons are pretty simple, really. Some people are, probably the vast majority, they're happy with their life the way it is. They see no reason for adventure. They see no reason for seeing the world. I don't know. I saw a number once where something like 30 to 40% of U.S. citizens don't have a passport and have never had a passport. They have never gone out of the country. They see no need to go out of the country, and they never have. So they're going to have a particular perspective that is not going to be like yours if you are thinking about becoming an expat seriously, retiring somewhere else. Their financial situation may be such that, depending on yours, if you're just kind of having a hard time or just getting by in the States or in Canada and you want to go somewhere else where all of a sudden your standard of living comes up and you get like, I got a breather on the money that I have. Now I got leeway. If that's your case, it may not be the case of your friends or coworkers. They may have more than enough money to get by. So a lot of logical, good reasons why they are content to be where they are. And then there's other people who are just simply afraid. They would just never consider it. And those are the ones I think tend to be the negative ones. Ones just can't understand it and they let it go. Others, they want to be negative about it. So in that context, okay, a lot of things come up. And I'll just start with Argentina, but I'm not talking about Argentina. You can port this over to Panama, and I'll actually do that. You can port it over to other countries, what I'm about to say, okay? So let's start with Argentina. Wow, they got crazy inflation there. It's on like 140, 150, 180%. They just devalued the peso. They cut the value in half, although it already was in half. They did this, they did that. There's people marching in the streets because some of the social services and a lot of people got let go. All of that stuff. Oh, you wouldn't want to go there. It's dangerous. Okay? Or, while there was marches in the streets for a couple months in Panama, you don't want to go there. Okay? And you can do it to Thailand. You can do it actually for Spain. There was marches, I don't know, I think like 2-3 weeks ago, big marches, and I think they kind of got out of hand, sort of, slight little, not quite riot, but somewhere in that realm between, normal and rioting in Madrid for, I don't even know what it was for. Point being, that stuff happens all over, okay? And if you're an expat, okay, in Panama or in Argentina, that isn't going to bother you at all. It's not going to affect you. If it does, it's going to be a tiny little bit, it'll be at best an inconvenience. Let me put it in a totally different way. I would much rather have been in Panama when those demonstrations in the streets over the mine thing was going on than I would ever want to be in downtown San Francisco. Okay, you do not want to be in downtown San Francisco. Your car is going to get, hijacked. Your windows are going to get broken in. Your stuff is going to get stolen. You're going to get beat over the head on the street. Downtown San Francisco, it's kind of like a war zone. It's dangerous, flat out dangerous. These other two things that I was describing, again, stuff's going on, but it's not dangerous. It's not an inconvenience. Nobody's going to get hurt in Panama, while they're doing it. They're making a statement, okay? So you have to kind of think in those terms. And the reason it doesn't bother you is because you have a perspective and you have options that local people who are doing those demonstrations and other things, they don't have. You have the option, A, to leave. You can just get up and go. You don't have to stay there. If it got really bad for you, you can just leave. Like right now, actually, there's been a ton of things going on in Ecuador with the gangs now over the last 2-3 weeks, probably before that, but now it's when it's hitting the papers and everything. The gangs have gotten out of control, taking over television stations, taking over the government buildings. I mean, it's bad. Ecuador has been a darling for retirees for, at least 20 years. It's been cheap, it's been nice, it's been pretty, it's been friendly and all that sort of stuff. But you don't want to be there now. You would not want to be in Ecuador now. But for the last 15 years, it's been totally fine. And if you're an expat versus a local, what do you do now? What's your option? The option is see ya, bye-bye, and leave. You go somewhere else. You go to Panama, you go to Colombia. Number two is you have different money. And that's huge. That is a huge thing. Let me tell you a story. And I'll try to put some pictures and things on the screen somewhere along this way, because I'm just winging this right now. I have some thoughts in my mind of what I would put on the video and stuff, but usually I do the videos ahead and kind of then do the talk like this. I'm just doing this because it's on my mind. And it's been bugging me because I want to tell you about these things. We were looking at maybe about 3 years ago, we were looking at Turkey. And you go, like, Turkey, what? Huh? Yeah, that was our thing too. It's like, Turkey, why would I want to go there? But here's what they did. Turkey had a thing where they decided to put this retirement, it wasn't even a retirement, actually, it was an immigration thing. If you took 250,000 US dollars and bought a place in Turkey, you bought an apartment, you bought a home, you put the money in the bank for 3 years, I think it was, and left it there and stuff like that, they would give you Turkish citizenship. You and your wife, and if you had little kids, they got it too. They would all get it. You get a Turkish passport, which is pretty darn awesome, really. And essentially the passport was free, really. Just before that, before it sort of went on my radar, my son went on our honeymoon to Istanbul and loved it, thought it was awesome. And I looked at Turkey, but then, now we're 2 years into it, and I'm like, oh, passport, that's interesting because that caught my eye. And I started looking at it, and it's like, wow, Istanbul is really a beautiful city. And I started looking down the coast, the other towns, and they're 1.5 million large. Some of them are like 200,000, and they're beautiful. And because the Turkish lira dropped so much that what was maybe a $350,000 condo in US dollars, all of a sudden became like maybe a $125,000 condo in US prices. For a Turkish person, it's still expensive. Okay, as a matter of fact, because of inflation, it's gone up. But because of their inflation against the dollar, the price to you, not being a local, has gone down. But, oh my God, it's Turkey. I don't know. Is that risky or whatever? So looking at Turkey, and then I'll go to some other countries because, it happens everywhere. It's just the way life goes. Turkey was a little maybe iffy, I don't know, say 8 or 9 years ago, or maybe even a little bit longer than that. But then people adjust and life goes on, and they figure out how to navigate everything. So for someone who went and got that passport and bought a condo in, say, Istanbul for 250 grand US, that thing now is worth about 400 US because everybody else, there's a lot of people from around the world went, wow, again, risk reward. A lot of people from around the world looked at that and go, I'll take that bet. I will take that bet 8 days to Sunday. For investing, when do you invest? You invest when there's blood in the streets. I don't mean real blood, but that's the phrase. In other words, when things look bleak and are at their worst and prices are really down and no one wants to do anything, that's when if you have the money and you have enough to risk a little bit, or you just think this is worth the gamble, you wade in and you take the risk. Now, for Turkey, what I've been explaining is, talking about here is going for the passport and buying something for $250,000. Okay, so you're putting money into it. You don't quite know how that's going to go. All right, but you're gambling that it's going to go up. But if you didn't do that at all, and you never put the money into the country, you just rented somewhere, you have zero risk. You have no risk at all. And for a whole bunch of years, it's been incredibly safe. Nobody's bothering you. I just saw a thing, I don't know, about maybe 5 or 6 months ago, because it kind of tweaked my interest, about Turkey again, because we were looking at Antalya and another town, just to the right of that toward Syria, down the road about 60 miles. And they're beautiful towns right on the Mediterranean with like a mountainy hill that goes up, pretty high. And there's houses all along looking out over the Mediterranean, and they're like no money. And they're beautiful, beautiful condos, big, cheap, beautiful homes, stunning homes and things, same thing. And you're like, wow, okay. So anyway, so I saw this article, and it was like the IMF or the World Economic Council, something like that. It was, it was a major think tank, whatever. They're gauging countries around the world, who's going to grow and who's not. The most outstanding country for growth, GDP, and the one that's going to be cranking is Turkey. And you go like, Turkey is what the country that they earmarked, better than France, better than Italy, better than Germany, better than England, better than all of the EU and a ton of other countries too, Turkey. Now, hold that thought. I just saw yesterday where the IMF was saying that they pegged Greece to be the leader in the EU this year of countries that are basically, they're on fire and they're coming up like this. Do you remember, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, Greece was that down and out country on their knees, just like Argentina. That's why I'm bouncing here. Not unlike Argentina, demonstrations in the streets, hey, you took away our, you're making our pensions, we can't retire at 55, now it's got to be 70 or 68 or whatever they made it. In other words, they changed things. They changed things, people were pissed off, and they're out. And then, that goes on for a month, 2 months, and then it settles down. This is what it is. People go back to work, people do what they do, they adapt, and life goes on. And now in 2024, it's going to be the leading country of the EU. Okay? Same thing kind of went on, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago in Thailand, when Southeast Asia, maybe it was like the end of the 90s. Yeah, more than 20 years ago, when there was, there was a collapse of everything in Southeast Asia, all those countries, and, they came back to be powerhouses. Will Argentina do that? And again, I'm not pushing Argentina. I'm just showing you a different way of thinking. Will Argentina turn around and come back? I mean, they got a lot of resources. They got a lot of stuff. The guy's doing things that are aggravating people, just like the other countries did. Will they pull it together? I have no idea. Is it worth the risk? Yeah, it probably is worth the risk. For one big reason. So check this out. Hopefully you can see this. If not, I'll scan it and put it on a thing. After, I'll take a look at this afterward and see if it's, the sun is shining through this. Buenos Aires, incredibly cheap for tourists. So all you have to do is change this word tourists for US, Canadian, EU retirees. Just change that word to that. And that's what it would be. Because again, if you go in with American money or euros or Canadian dollars and you're doing the flip, everything going on there doesn't matter to you. You are going to be living super cheap. You're not going to get hit over the head. You're not going to get robbed. You're not going to go through all of that because, a couple reasons. One, if you have any brains at all, you're just going to be careful about that so it doesn't happen to you. Number one, you'd have to probably be in a bad area. You're going to have enough money to not be in a bad area because there is a ton of really non-bad areas, say in Buenos Aires. And if you decide to go somewhere else, if you want to go to Mendoza, and where all the wine is, over toward the Andes, there's a whole bunch of beautiful cities in Argentina where you're out of that big city thing, where I'm sure it's going to be incredibly safe, but you're going to have a lot of money. Then that's the gamble. That's what people who are not expats, they don't get that. That's the game. The game is using your money and going somewhere where your money goes farther and you get a quality of life in some way. It's warmer instead of cold. Maybe it's cold instead of warm. You want to get away from the heat. You go where life is going to treat you better given the amount of money that you have. That's the actual game. And you can get that in tons of countries around the world simply by leaving your own country. But again, it takes a very different and a very special kind of person to do that because if it's you, you need to think differently. Now again, going on, I just want to bounce through a bunch of countries and I'm going to pause each time I say one and you just think back to the things that you know about that country and things you've heard about those countries over the years. Let's start with a really bad one. Colombia. Pablo Escobar. Cartels, shootings, oh my God, drug trade. I would never go there in a million years. Except that was ended like 20 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, they kind of eliminated that, and now it's a retirement haven. It's safe and it's nice and nobody bothers you and all that sort of stuff. It's not the same country. Like I mentioned, Greece. Ooh, I don't know if I want to go to Greece. No cartel, but yeah, man, that's really down and out. Again, it's going to be the winner of the EU this year. Now Argentina, there's another one. Let's throw out some, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, they all basically sort of went broke 20 years ago and they pulled out of it. And also another country, which I've never really sort of understood why they don't somehow get lumped into this by a lot of people, Mexico. Mexico has got, pretty significant cartel problem, and they've had it for years, decades actually, but for some reason, maybe it's because so many people vacation there, they go there because it's close, and then they leave and come back and nothing happened to them. People sometimes just assume it's safer, and I'm not saying it's not safe, but safer than these other alternatives that I've been going through, because if you said Colombia versus Mexico, depending on where you are, I think maybe Colombia was probably going to be safer than many parts of Mexico. Or you go Mexico, Panama, 100% for sure. Panama is like light years safer than Mexico. In Mexico, actually, sort of isn't that bad unless you're in the pockets where the cartels are. And even then, I don't know. I mean, we spent some time in Mazatlan many, many years ago, and there was a pretty big, I think that the Sinaloa cartel wasn't that far from there. Yeah, a couple of people had got shot downtown. It was a gang thing. Did anybody else get bothered? No. Did we get bothered when we were there? We were there like 3 weeks? No. Our friends they retired there. They would go there, snowbird type thing every winter. Nobody bothered them. So, even there, I don't know, and that's cartel town. So, everything is relative. Again, that's the 98% that gives you bad news. The 2%, or 1.5 to 2% like you, they just go, how am I going to deal around this? How do I plan to protect myself? How do I keep my options open? How do I use my money, leave my money somewhere else, maybe in the US or Canada, or, somewhere in one of the countries in the EU where you're comfortable with it there, you move just operating money to live on into that country, and just in case you want to bail out and you rent. You just, you give your rent notice, call it a day, and, and that's the end of the story. Let me show you one more thing and I'll end it on this, and thank you for watching this. I know it bounced around and it's kind of a weird video, but I think it really, really matters. I'm going to leave you with something on the screen that a few days ago was in the Wall Street Journal, okay? And again, I am not pushing this country on you. I'm just pointing out that negative stuff isn't always correct if you know what you're doing.